Hello and welcome back. So as I've done here for several weeks now, we're going to take a look at the top 5 performers from last week with under 50% ownership. So as usual, we'll look at 3 forwards, 2 D, and 1 goalie, and maybe an honorable mention in there as well. This week saw some incredible performances from guys like Pastrnak, who had 7 goals in 4 games, Jack Hughes with 5 goals, 7 points, and 25 shots in 3 games, as well as guys like Tavares, Shen, Ovi, Matthews, Draisaitl, etc. But all of those guys are expected to perform that way, and they're owned up. So let's take a look at the top performers that may actually be there for you on your wire, and we'll start with a rookie who's actually fantasy relevant right now, and that is Mason McTavish. So he's a center left wing, dual position eligible, 21% owned, and he's a rookie, and I usually don't advise taking rookies, but when you start to see the performance, you can ride that hot streak a little bit. And we saw that performance this past week. 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, 1 on the power play, and 12 shots. So an excellent week. You can see the game log down here. 2 multi-point games, a 4-point game against San Jose, a 2-point game against Dallas in a 2-0 win. And he's getting shot volume this entire week as well. Throws a couple of hits and blocks in there. On the season, 41 games, 9 goals, 17 assists, 26 points, 10 on the power play, which is really good. 88 shots on top of all of that. And he's factored himself into the Calder race right now. Obviously, guys like Beniers, Logan Thompson, Kochetkov, they're all in the mix as well. But with the way McTavish is playing, especially for a team that really is struggling, they're the last place team in the league for a reason. They have trouble keeping pucks out of their net. They have trouble putting pucks in the opposing team's net. So for a guy like McTavish to perform this way, especially against a quality opponent in Dallas, that's a good sign going forward, especially if you have him in a keeper league. Now let's take a look at his player hub. So what you see here, he's the highest rated player on the Ducks, which means he's the most complete fantasy player in leagues that have hits and blocks. That's what this is calculating right here. And he covers a little bit of everything when it comes to the offensive categories. Now he's not elite in any one particular thing. His highest percentile is 84, and that's power play points per game, and he's at 0.25, which is really close to that 0.30 threshold that I've been talking about all season. So he's starting to produce on the power play, or he's been doing that all year. He's getting some shot volume. The assists are there. The goal coverage is pretty good. 0.65 points per game. You'd like to see that a little bit higher if you were going to own him for the entire season. But he's definitely a good streaming option right now because he's a little bit, he's going to cover a little bit of everything for you. Pretty complete all around. And again, he's the best player on the Ducks right now when it comes to hits and blocks leagues. So this is a guy that I would definitely keep an eye on going forward. If the Ducks have a 4-game week from here on out, I would definitely look to him because he is dual position eligible. He could potentially get in your lineup and help you in any particular league format. Now, the second player on this week's list is J.G. Pageau. He's a center only, so he's not going to give you that positional flexibility. 25% owned, but he's a very unique player. He's basically a Swiss Army knife for the New York Islanders and for your fantasy team. His Week 13 performance, 3 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, so that's a point per game, really not bad, a power play point. But the reason he was rated so high in Yahoo category leagues, 17 hits. That's 5.6 hits per game this past week, which is incredible. You're lucky to get a guy who's hitting 4 hits per game on average, and he was well above that this past week. I don't know how sustainable that is, but we'll see in just a minute that he does hit frequently. Now, his season performance, 41 games, 10 goals, 14 assists, 24 points, not bad at all. But then you look at the hits, 115 hits. But he also gets power play points. Usually hits guys don't play on the power play, but he does. He's got 8 power play points. He also plays the penalty kill, 2 shorthanded goals, and 2 game-winning goals. So what that means for you, if you're in a points league that has game winners, shorthanded goals, power play points, hits, you have to own this guy because he covers a little bit of everything. And a lot of times you'll get an extra weighting for shorthanded points. So any given week, if he gets a shorthanded goal, he's going to help you win your week in that particular week. Now, If you're in a face-off league, he's 4th in the entire NHL in face-off wins, and he's probably owned up in your face-off league already because somebody has to have figured this out by now. He's 57% in the dot, 458 face-off wins thus far this season. And if you look at his game log, he had a 2-goal game against Vancouver. This is on the West Coast swing that the Islanders were on. Didn't have anything against Edmonton, but even when he's not scoring, 5 hits, 3 blocks, that's still going to get you some category coverage. And then he had an assist against Calgary. Then we take a look at his player hub, and this is where you start to see his value. He's not below 68th percentile in anything. He covers everything really well. He's 94th percentile in hits, 2.8 hits per game, but he more than doubled that up this past week, which is why he was factored in so high on the Yahoo rankings. So he rates a 77 overall, which is second on the Isles on the Data Draft Player Hub, behind only Anders Lee, who's just a fraction above him. But this is because he covers so much. He covers a little bit of everything, not exceptional at anything other than hits. But again, he's going to get you some offensive production, hits, power play production, shorthanded production, some game winners. He factors in all situations for the Islanders. So going forward, if you're in need of a hits guy and you want to use a positional, a center position, this is definitely the guy to go for. The only problem that I would find with him is that he's not a center left wing or a center right wing. So I would have to factor that in because I have a couple of good centers. But if you're in need of a center for the next couple of weeks, this is a guy that's been getting it done all season long, and he's very consistent. Now, our third forward this week is Morgan Frost, and I mentioned him yesterday in the weekly video. He's a dual-eligible center left winger, 10% owned right now. Nobody wants to own Flyers, and we saw last night why. So John Tortorella benched Tony DeAngelo last night. He didn't see any time. I think it was like midway through the second period on. He didn't see any time. He's benched Kevin Hayes before. Kevin Hayes is an all-star, so you never know who Torts is going to bench. But right now, Frost is the top-line center. So you do need to take that into account. If you look at his Week 13 performance, 3 games, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, 2 power play points, and 9 shots. So an excellent week, well over a point per game for Frost. You can take a look at his game log right down here. A 4 assist, 2 power play point game against Arizona with 4 shots, 2 hits, and a block. So doing a little bit of everything in that game. Probably his best game in the NHL thus far. Then you add in that Anaheim game, he scored a goal, and he's been very productive this past week and probably for the last 3 or 4 weeks if you're looking back into his game log. On the season, 39 games, 8 goals, 11 assists, 19 points, 3 power play points, and 2 game-winning goals. So he's been very good over the last month or so since he's gotten bumped up into the top 6. Then you look at his player hub, and there's nothing remarkable here, but what you notice is he is pretty consistent. So he's getting some hits, getting some blocks, which is pretty good to see out of a rookie. And then he's covering everything at about the same pace. So 66, 67th percentile. You'd like to see the shots come up a little bit. You'd like to see him get a little bit more power play time. His point per game is okay. This is not something that I would necessarily own year long, but on a week where he had this kind of production and you're trying to follow it up next week, this is a guy that you could potentially look for. Now, in the weekly video, I also mentioned that the Flyers have a 5-game week, not this upcoming week, but the next week. They've got 3 games this week and 5 games next week. So if you're looking to target Flyers, why not target their top-line center in Morgan Frost right now? And that brings us to our defensemen of the week. And this, we're going to start off with 2 defensemen in one slide because they're basically the same type of player. But we have Martin Fehervary and Connor Clifton. Fehervary 16% owned, Clifton 28% owned. They both had excellent weeks, but only if you have hits and blocks in your league. So you can see here, Fehervary 6, 2, 4, 4 in the hits column. The blocks are there as well, 3, 3, 6, 2. Getting a couple of shots as well, and he did have a goal against Columbus. Then you compare that with Connor Clifton. I've been talking about him for a big chunk of the season as a hits and blocks guy that'll get you some offensive production. Fehervary outperformed him offensively this week, but that was just 1 goal more than what Clifton had. But then you see the hits for Clifton. 5-4-6-2, and then the blocks. Look at this 9-block game against Anaheim in a 7-1 win, no less. Usually you'd think that guys would take it easy in a 7-1 win. Not Clifton. He was blocking everything that moved. Now, when you look at the player hub, this is why we're doing this together. You can see these lines here, the red and the blue. Fehervary, 97th percentile in hits, 3.2 per game. This is why you own him. So don't take this rating into account. The rating is a rating of how complete a player is in hits and blocks leagues. Well, he's not that complete. He's got no power play production, hardly any assists, not a lot of shots, hardly any goals. His point per game is pretty low. But what he will do is hit everything that moves, and he'll get you some shot blocks as well, 91st percentile there. But then you look at Clifton, and you get a lot of the same. So you get 94th percentile in hits, 2.76 per game, so a little bit lower. You get 1.32 blocks per game for 81st percentile, but you do get a little bit more offensive production out of Clifton. So you got 0.24 on the assist per game, 56th percentile. The shots are at 1.5, which is just a slight increase from Fehervary, but you do get a little bit more goal production and point production as well. So these two guys are guys that you're going to look for in bangers leagues. If you're in a bangers league and you see one of these teams playing a 4-game week, these are the guys to pick up because they'll get you hits and blocks, and then they'll throw in the odd goal and assist every now and then. But it is worth noting that Washington only plays 2 times this week, so maybe not the right week to pick up Fehervary, but we do want to recognize what he did last week. So these two guys were rated pretty high on the Yahoo ratings this week, but that was mainly because of their hits and blocks coverage, which is why I'm featuring them together. Now as we look at our next defenseman, this is a guy I talked about early in the season, Calen Addison, 14% owned, and he is a power play specialist. So you don't often see this where a guy is 94th percentile in power play production, but he also doesn't shoot a lot. He doesn't get a lot of goals. The assists are there. So basically, he's a power play assist specialist. This is pretty much what used to come from John Klingberg. Maybe a little bit different picture with the peripherals, but basically, John Klingberg used to be a power play production assist guy. And now you're seeing that in Calen Addison. If you look at week 13, 3 games, 5 points, a goal and 4 assists, 3 on the power play, 11 shots. And you can see his game log here, a multi-point game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's really impressive for a young player, elevating his game against one of the best teams in the league. Then a 2 assist on the power play game against Buffalo. And then when he's not scoring, 5 shots on goal against St. Louis. That's what you like to see when they're not producing. Are they doing something else for your team? On the season, 38 games played, 3 goals, 18 assists, 21 points, 15 of those points on the power play, and a game-winning goal. So if you own him, you would probably like to see a little bit more 5-on-5 production, but you're not getting that. And what you are getting is access to Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and the rest of that top power play unit. So this is why he becomes fantasy relevant. And at 14% ownership, I would definitely take a look at this guy, especially if they have a 4-game week, which they don't this week. But if you ever see them have a 4 or 5-game week, they're probably not going to have a 5-game week. But in a nice week, this is a guy to pick up, especially if you're in need of power play points and assist production. Now, as we turn to the goaltender of the week, this is a guy that I normally would warn you to stay away from, but we have to give credit where it's due. Alex Stalock, 10% owned, had an exceptional week on a bad team. 3 games played, 2 wins, 2.0 goals against, .938 save percentage, and a shutout. So you can see here in the game log, he had that shutout against Arizona, a 2-0 win. That was a matchup play. So if you're looking to stream a goalie like this, those are the kind of matchups you want to look at. A team that's at the same kind of comparable level as the Chicago Blackhawks, which would be Arizona at this point. He did have a nice game against Calgary. They did get the win. I had Markstrom in one of my leagues, and I sat him because I just figured it was a bad spot for him to start, and it was. Lucas Reichel went off in that game, which kind of definitely helped them win the game. But nonetheless, a 44 save performance from Stalock. He didn't have the best game earlier in the week, but these 2 games definitely were worth mentioning. On the season, 12 starts, 6-5-1. Not bad at all for a team that's struggling mightily. 2.54 goals against and a .923 save percentage with 1 shutout. His 6.3 goals saved above expected is actually 18th in the league. So he's outperforming the quality of shots that he's getting, which means he's playing very well. Now, the reason why I would tell you to stay away from him is because Chicago is 23rd in the league in expected goals against and 24th in actual goals against. But because of the fact that he's got this goals saved above expected above, a relative good number, he's above 0, obviously, but he's, pretty high up there in the rankings, all things considered. If you have a start like this against Arizona, that's where you could potentially stream him and get some value out of him. I wouldn't start him against a team like Tampa Bay for this reason. Now, if you look at this, this is this goalie hub. Now, this goalie hub was updated on January 2nd, so I haven't updated it with all of these stats in mind. But what you're getting a look at is what he would be like without this weak performance. So without that, he's still got a really good save percentage. He's still got a pretty decent goals against. He doesn't have good team defense, but his expected goals is pretty good. So you're getting a pretty talented goaltender with a good save percentage and good goals against. He's not going to get you a lot of starts, and he's not going to get you a lot of wins. And you're going to have to kind of pick and choose what starts you're going to give him if he's playing on your fantasy team, because some of these are questionable. You don't want to start him against the powerhouse teams, especially the teams in his division. But nonetheless, a great week for Alex Stalock. Now that brings us to our honorable mention, and we did have one other player I wanted to talk about, and that is K'Andre Miller. So Miller, 39% owned. His week 13 performance, 3 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 8 shots, 5 hits, and 4 blocks. So covering a little bit of everything. And it's worth noting here, 2 power play points. That second power play unit on the season only has 3 goals. The entire power play production on the Rangers comes from that top unit. So the second unit doesn't get a lot of opportunity. I believe Philip Hedl has 2 of those goals. One of them was an empty netter. But K'Andre Miller factoring in on the power play production that is not belonging to the top unit, which you do like to see. It's an excellent step in the right direction for his growth as a young defenseman in the league. Now, you see here on the game log, a multi-point game against Carolina, one of the best teams in the league, and he covered everything: goal, assist, power play point, shot, 2 hits, and a block. Then he comes back and puts up a power play assist with a shot and 2 hits. And then this game against Jersey, an assist and 6 shots on goal with a hit and 3 blocks. So you're getting consistent production out of him now, and this has been going on for about a month. I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago in one of these type of things where he was having a good week. I said I wouldn't necessarily stream him long term, but as he's progressed, as he's kept this up, he's starting to bring his offensive game into focus. And that's something that once you've seen it for over a month, now you can start to think about potentially streaming him longer term and potentially keeping him on your roster, maybe for the remainder of the season. And the reason you do that is because of his player hub right here. So you get 2.1 hits per game, which is pretty good. You get the blocks, 78th percentile in blocks. The power play production is not really there normally. He did get it this past week, but again, that top unit takes up all the oxygen in the room. 1.48 shots per game is not great, but he is shooting more lately. You can see 8 shots in 3 games. That's almost 3 shots per game over the last week. His assist production is where he's going to make a lot of his offensive production come into play. So he's not necessarily going to be a goal scorer, though he has that ability. He's been showing it in flashes. You saw that goal last year against Florida. You've seen it a couple of times this year. You've seen it in the shootout every now and then. But this is a guy that is only growing into his game, and he's getting better with every game. And he's a guy that the analytics kind of show that he's a better player than fantasy would. He's excellent with his stick. He breaks up plays as they're entering into the zone, creates offensive chances in transition, and he's got the legs to kind of make up for any gaps that he's got. If he gets caught up ice, he can get back and make a defensive play. So really impressed with his overall game. I think I said that last time we were talking about him, but now his fantasy game is starting to come into focus, and this is something that you could pay attention to, especially for the back half of the season. If you're missing some defensemen, I have John Carlson. I'm trying to fill that hole. I've been filling it with Vince Dunn. If he falls off, this is maybe a guy to look for some defensive category coverage. But that's going to do it for this video. Again, if you want any of the player hubs that you saw in this video, you can go to the Patreon link in the description below. I just want to remind you to like and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 2,000 subscribers before the All-Star break, so we've got a couple of weeks here left. I think I'm only like 50 subscribers away. So any help that you can give me with that, I truly appreciate it. Remember to follow Data Draft on Instagram at data_draft. And as always, I will see you in the next one.